Hello and welcome back to the Christian Therapist Podcast. Lindsey Castleman here and with Aron Strong. Hello, Aron.
Hey, Lindsey. We probably wear a joke out because we're always like saying hi to each other like we haven't been talking to each other right before we hit record. But but we're welcoming everybody in. Like here's who you got today. We're both
Right.
here.
And we're
Uh,
here. We made
and,
it. We
and
made it.
we're glad the listeners here, right, to join in the conversation. Like we're all
Right.
here together.
Right. Well, I think too, even our intro is like with Aron and Lindsey. And then I'm like,
Yeah,
and here we
right.
are again.
Yeah,
It's
that's right.
still us, just making
It's
sure
still
you
us.
know.
That's right. Here we are.
She wasn't telling you an untruth when she said we'd be here. We're still here. So Aron, we are. Well, one, I know with podcasts, you don't really like timestamp things. Um, but man, in a busy season,
Yeah.
in end of school, all things are wrapping up. My fifth grader is having his very last things in elementary school, which is just a wild, wild feeling. Um, so man, I know there's just a lot of like things winding down, things ramping up,
Yep.
nostalgia just happening all around. And so
It's so busy. You're trying to do all the things and you're trying to soak it up at the same time. And that's kind of hard to do when
right.
you're stressed out with all the things you're trying to do. It's just complicated.
Yes, yes. And then of course I sit back and I'm like, oh my gosh, here are all these like things and ways I want to say thank you to the teachers and to all these places. And they're probably going to have to get something over the summer. You know,
Yeah.
like it's just I have to give myself grace. I can't balance it all, in this
That's
place,
right.
and that's okay. But what we can do, Aron, is we can continue our series of what is really happening with, which has been it's been a fun series, but there has been a place where we're sitting back and going, okay, we kind of know these things, like some of these things we want to talk about, but how can we make it relatable to all therapists where
Hmm.
it's like, oh, I have sat with that presentation or some iteration of it, um, which can be a tough thing because there is part of us that wants to continually look under the hood.
Yeah. It's kind of a tricky thing because in some ways we're looking at stereotypes,
Hmm.
categorizing people based on a presentation, which really is kind of counter to how we do therapy, right? We
Right.
don't put people in categories. We go discover the person we got,
Hmm.
and because in their uniqueness of however their presentation shows up. But there's trends in how certain things show up, and that's relatable. Everybody understands kind of what we say, maybe what we say, what we're going to work on today. People like, oh, I know that person, you know what I mean? And because they've had
Hmm.
experience. But in all the things that we discover or we discuss around each of these unique presentations, we're hoping to help inspire everyone to know how to look underneath the hood,
Hmm.
to go discover those things. So whether they're barely on the spectrum or they're like pegged to the far end of the spectrum of whatever presentation there is, we're
Right.
building a skill set that kind of can understand the function of a behavior and kind
Hmm.
of what sets that thing up in process, what establishes that schema that they're in, and
Right.
then how do we kind of get under the surface and work with that. And so hopefully they're translatable skills, not just for a particular stereotype we're talking about this.
Yes. Yes. Well, it is funny, to kind of our process, again, looking under the hood is like, man, whether it's in personal life, whether it's in case presentations that we have, just working with clients, it's like, man, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Okay,
Yeah,
now what's the category? You
that's
know,
right.
and so after again behind the curtain, under the hood, after kind of sitting back and really trying to like go, no, like this is it, this is it, this is it. Aron, you're good about being like, okay, so here's what I'm hearing. And what we were talking about came up with the phrase, which I feel like it's like dun dun dun. Here's the
Yeah.
phrase we came up with. Really, you came up with, which I thought fit beautifully.
And it's probably already in the
Truthfully,
title of the podcast, so
it
they
is in
already
the
know what it
title of the
is.
podcast, exactly, right? It is what's really happening with, drum roll, the perpetual victim.
Yeah.
Because when you said those words, the perpetual victim, I was like, yeah, that fits.
Hmm.
That's the stereotype. That's what it can look like above the surface. And so I think it's important to talk about how the perpetual victim can look above the
Hmm.
surface, right?
Hmm.
Because, and to a degree, whether we have seen a bazillion clients or we've just lived life,
Yep.
we have encountered, or we could be, the perpetual victim.
Right. And it, well, because it's the perpetual victim, sometimes as a presentation that shows up in every facet of their life. You
Hmm.
know, their personal life, their work life, their church community, you know, their sports community, like wherever they are, that shows up. And then there's in the spectrum, there's people that they only show up like that with their spouse, right? With
Hmm.
their spouse, they're always the victim, but not anywhere else,
Hmm.
but just here. So
Hmm.
there's a spectrum through which that these things can show up and how many people it is activated by
Yes.
and kind of what it's
Yes.
looking for. So just know that that's we're not just describing someone who's like, you know, lurking the halls of, you know, the synagogue looking for someone to rescue them, right?
Right.
To go be a victim and kind of use sometimes because people feel used by perpetual victims because
Hmm.
they're always looking for a rescue, they're always looking for a handout, they're always looking for
Correct.
someone to show up for them. And well-meaning people feel are struck with compassion initially, and then you give and you show up, and then you
Hmm.
think it's going to change, and it doesn't, and the asks continue and the needs continue, and then you feel kind of trapped by your compassion because now they're reliant on you, and
Hmm.
then you start to feel stuck. Like, what do I do now? Right? Boy, I really stepped in it this time.
Yes. Yes. Well, and there's even that place too where you start to, as a clinician, at least for me, there have been times where I'm starting to hear some of the same stories over and over again, but still feeling that feeling from them of like, can you believe? And I start to go, I can believe now. You
Yeah,
know, like, yes. At first, I'm like shocked, like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that. Or I can't believe you went through that. Or I can't believe, that is happening to you or that's still happening to you. But then there comes a point where I start to go, oh, okay, this is like a self state.
yeah,
This
right.
isn't something that is a one-off, like, whoa. And then we're back to a good sense of self, or we're
Hmm.
back to this place of self-leadership, you know, and going back to this place of being reliant on God, on the Holy Spirit, on Jesus, like finding a place of stability.
Yeah,
You start, for me, I start to go, oh, okay, this is a place that you are almost frozen in, stuck in, you're looping in. We're
hmm,
not moving out of this,
right.
right? Because there's like a collapse of yourself in here.
Yep.
Um, but it really, like you were saying, I think that is true. It can span the gamut where there are those where you're just like, man, whoa. Um, it's obvious, but then there are also on the whole other end of the spectrum, there are those where it's like they still can present, with a very good sense of self, what can look like.
Yep.
Um, but sitting back and when you hear the way that things are narrated, the way that things show up within them, I think the way that I said it to you earlier when we were talking before this, I'm like, it just didn't feel like a sense of balance
Right.
in there.
Yeah.
If that makes
I think
sense.
that's important to note too, because there are people that are more demonstrative and how they show up and as they feel like a victim. And then there's the quiet victims, right?
Hmm.
They'll show up very compassionate. They're very socially engaged. You won't even know that they feel that way, but they feel like that all the time. And as soon as you start engaging at a deeper level, as soon as you begin to access their distress, this is the state that arrives, and that's very difficult to shake because it's
Hmm.
the lens through which they see the world.
Hmm.
I'm always trapped at the
Hmm.
bottom of the totem pole. I'll never get prioritized.
Right.
And that becomes just very difficult and complicated to navigate.
Hmm.
And so sometimes, so it can be extroverted. It can also be very introverted in how it shows up.
Right.
And many people may not see the introverted one, but as a therapist, eventually we'll run into it. Like we'll find, like it'll be there.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And there is a part of me too, and I feel like that part of me is like, oh, you could be treading on murky waters here, but sometimes you can find that in those that look more like caregivers
Hmm.
too.
Right. Yep. Yep.
Um, because there is a place of I am giving out in this way. But it's I'm giving out in this way not because I am pouring out of a full cup that's wanting to give. It's
Yep.
because I've got an empty cup and I'm wanting to give and hoping that this giving is going to then come back and fill up my cup. And it never does in the way that I want it to. And
Yep.
so then there is this place inside of me that can feel like the victim continually because
Yep.
look at all that I'm doing. Look at
Yep.
everything that I'm doing. And then you slow down and you start to ask them, like, hey, did people around you like kind of ask for you to show up for them in these ways?
Yeah, because that
And
disappointedness of not being recognized in how they get they look,
mhm,
because I did this and no one even cared, no one even responded. Like, but like yeah, that point you're making, like, well, no one was asking for it. They're like, oh, thanks, because
right,
yeah,
right.
they didn't know the rules, they didn't know
Hmm.
the framework in which you were giving that was supposed to be noticed or supposed to be seen and validated because that's what you keep looking for. And so in that regard, what they're doing is noble. This presentation is noble, but
Yes.
yet the underlying injury of no one cares no matter how I show up just
Hmm.
leads to another collapse as soon as they're not acknowledged.
Right. It to me, it feels like a benevolent self-preservation.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, like a give to get, right?
Yes.
I'm not giving out of a desire to just give. I'm giving in the hopes that someone will see how I give and want to reciprocate and
Hmm.
give to me. And I mean, there's a lot of terrible ways to navigate injuries. Like, it's not a terrible, terrible one. It's very
Right.
loving and compassionate to people. It just never shifts the bar
Hmm.
on what's actually needed is this feeling of care and security because it's never accurately portrayed as what's longed for. It's
Right.
hidden. It's, subtext. You're supposed to catch it somehow,
Yes.
right? Because they're not going to just disclose
Hmm.
how injured they are. So this spectrum between the person who shows up and is very
Hmm.
overt in their like victimhood of like I've just been injured and nobody cares, and then there's these covert perpetual victims that kind of
Hmm.
like hide along the way and uh,
And look
and
good.
and look good, right? You're just
Yeah.
like, why are you so mad? I appreciated it. Thanks. You know what I mean? But your
Hmm.
response didn't meet the thing they were looking for.
Hmm.
And then suddenly you're a mean person because you didn't respond the right way. And you're like,
Yeah.
not supposed to be responding a right way. Like, when did that happen? But
Hmm.
yet the victim feels very injured,
Yes. Yes.
right? Or
And
re-injured even.
correct. And what you're saying there, Aaron, is important, because they are the victim and they feel injured because at some point they were.
Yeah. Perpetual victims get that way because at some point they were a victim. No one chooses just to be a victim. Like that's not something anybody picks on purpose just for any reason. At some point something was neglected, something, and it's important to recognize victim is not just an act of violence,
Hmm.
right? There's neglect,
Hmm.
there's parentification is a kind of injury that children
Mhm.
experience, and being required to do things they're unable to do, and all of their needs were unseen and unvalidated. And so it harms. The victim is one
Mhm.
who is harmed, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And when you didn't have power to protect yourself and someone did something that harmed you, that's the definition of a victim.
Hmm. Right, right. And, I would also say the younger that these injuries happened, like going back to when our prefrontal cortex is still developing, not fully developed, didn't really even have much of one at all, just depends on how young these injuries happened.
Right.
Um, can be, just the like severity in which it flooded, in which it wounded, in which it has kind of been lodged in the body and lodged in the person. And so
Hmm.
with that, there's such a sense of compassion. There's such a sense of um I don't know, just it can be this place of compassion, of protection, of wanting to give them a better story, wanting to give them a different story
Yep.
in that. Um, and what can also happen too is that if that has been the place that they've been in for so long, that has been the pattern, that has been the state, we're going back to self state, it feels like the state they've been in that can feel like self. It's not, but it's just such the familiar state. It's just like
Hmm.
that's what we know how to operate in and out of.
That's right. And then we've used self state a couple times, and I don't know if
Mhm.
everyone is familiar with that term, right?
Mhm.
IFS is a very popular
Mhm.
modality nowadays, and so people recognize parts. But the more accurate neurological term is that self
Mhm.
state. It's part of how the brain has stored memory and feeling and experience, the meaning, and the version of me that was active when that circuit was neurologically bound together, that self state, that aspect of me,
Mhm.
bound with all of these unique, specific experiential components.
Mhm.
And they're linked together into a circuit. When that circuit is activated by a cue in our environment, that version memory aspect of me is bundled with these experiences and then is brought to bear because it was relevant in the experience that we had. And when with these self states and these constructs are unresolved, when
Mhm.
they're activated, they show up the way they were stored, which is unresolved.
Right.
And so we have these injuries, right, that we experience. And so every time this construct in our mind, this neural circuit is activated, the experience of being injured and being a victim comes with it.
Right.
And it may look like, are you serious? This circumstance is not equal to the amount of victimhood you experience. And that's true
Hmm.
because it's not.
Yeah.
It's people kind of show you the ways they've been injured by the weird and inappropriate ways they respond to things. You're like,
Mhm.
your injury is way bigger than this context. And that's because it is. And it
Yeah.
helps us know that there's a history
Mhm.
behind the presentation that cues us to where the work is.
Mhm.
Because this feeling has been elicited in the body, like this is how it feels, has
Mhm.
always felt, and this is similar to all those past experiences.
Yeah. And the difficulty can be is that especially when we're working with people as adults, where this has been their state for so long,
Right.
it is like the devil that you know,
Hmm.
like it is.
It's just the glasses you wear. It's the lens you interpret everything through.
Right, right. And so much so that it can feel like a security blanket. So to not show up, like even, I mean, because we're in the South
Right.
and there is such a state of bless your heart. Like attention will come to you. Like
Yep.
these things will come to you if you show up and you're like, let me tell you all the ways in which I have been wronged. that it can start to fill up, um, going back to it's a different way of filling up these woundings, but again, they don't satisfy.
No. Well, the seeking, there's such a strong seeking for a corrective experience, a seeking of being prioritized, of being chosen, of being helped, of being rescued. But when there's a big history of that, a
Mm-hmm.
an experience of that, or even a small window of that, is insufficient to overcome the history of confirming experiences we've had in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And but that's exhausting to people, right? When they show up that way, and therapists and regular people unintentionally add insult to injury, right? They just confirm all the worst beliefs because we say, "Wow, your injury is way too big for me. You need to go take care of that by yourself. Like you need to get over it
Mm-hmm.
because your distress is distressing to me. So I don't want any part of that. Go away, take care of
Mm-hmm.
yourself, manage yourself, all the story, whatever stories we carry in ourselves of what we've done with
Sure,
our injuries that
sure.
weren't presenting them as a victim. We're just like, well, you just got to tuck that away and act like it didn't happen and it doesn't matter
Yeah.
because nobody cares and I don't care about yours and you don't care about mine and that kind of posture.
Mm-hmm.
But then that is a confirmation to the perpetual victim that
Yeah.
solidifies the neural construct that they have that they will always be a victim because nobody cares, no one's coming,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? So then it just cycles and people stay in these really stuck states.
For sure. And I believe also in our office, there can be a place of just starting to notice that feeling inside of them, though, when you do start to shift a little bit of that focus from what was done to them to having them start to see that that could be a little bit of a badge that they wear. That
Sure.
like there can be a difficulty there because sometimes to some degree, no matter how many times you do try to come for them, um, as therapists, we weren't the one that did that original harming, which a lot of times it can feel like that's what they're longing to have come for them,
Right.
you know, which can be a little bit difficult, but it's starting to move them from all the content
Hmm.
into seeing like what is the process, like what's actually happening when they start to go into all of the stories, when they start to
Yeah.
go into all of these places. Like that's,
Everybody,
yeah.
sorry,
Well, no, I was
everybody,
just, yeah, yeah, you got it. You
no,
got it, Aaron.
everybody needs to establish their value somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We have to believe in our own value and the value of that we hold ourselves in is established and verified by the way others value us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a completely independent and reciprocal process. I have to believe it about myself, but I'm also my belief of myself is established and shaped by the way people show up for me,
Mm-hmm.
and I contribute to theirs. So we all have to find a way of being valued. And oftentimes, the perpetual victim is a victim in these ways because they don't feel valued by someone else. So
Mm-hmm.
they have to keep fighting for their value, right? Because if
Mm-hmm.
I can proclaim my need or show up in a certain way and someone shows up with compassion, it helps me feel like I have a value. But the injury doesn't feel valued. And because the injury's never fully shifted,
Right.
that sense of dissatisfaction or not being satiated of establishing a new value and stepping into that is kind of like this like a bucket with a hole in it. It comes in, but it pours out, so it's not
Mm-hmm.
resilient. So then that badge then becomes its own kind of value, right? I'm valuable because I am a victim, because I am going to show up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because we see that show up in very valid places, right? We show up with like, you know, abuse survivors,
Mm-hmm.
right? Trafficking survivors, rape survivors, cancer survivors. There's a sense of like I was victimized by this external source, and there's a validity to my experience that I can wear with a badge to proclaim, hey, I've overcome this thing that happened to me.
Hmm.
Except for the perpetual victim, they never quite overcome,
Right. Right.
right? It's this badge that proclaims their need, which is it's a proclaiming a value, but because it's never satisfied, it's always seeking. It just can't be satisfied.
Yes. Well, and Aaron, I want for us to be able to, just really slow down and talk about, okay, so we have established this is what the perpetual victim can look like on the surface.
Yep.
A lot of different presentations, a lot of different ways that they can show up, and that there is going to be a resistance because to some degree, I think a little bit of what you're describing too is like that perpetual victim can be like it can become their identity.
Right. That's
Like
right.
that can become who they think they are,
Mhm.
because there is still this place that has not been healed. And
Yep.
to a degree, um, it has satisfied a part of that injury, but not
Hmm.
the all, not the
Right.
entire injury.
Yep.
So I want for us to slow this down. Now, we're not going to do it today because it's going to be a longer conversation, but there is a place when we come back for our next podcast is to be able to go, okay, now with the perpetual victim, how do we slow down and help them recognize that in themselves and go after that place in them that really needs the care, that really needs the different story,
Yep.
like really needs something that it's not gotten before. Um, because I think that's the reason we all get into this is we don't want to, we don't want to kind of have our clients come in and then leave in the same states.
Right.
We want we want to help them move from this kind of self state to one that feels more anchored in truth, anchored in love, anchored in care, and that they can start to get um, you know, just these injuries really seen and I don't know if satisfied is the right word, but
They may be
just
resolved. Resolution doesn't always mean satisfied, but
sure.
enters a state where the dilemma has an answer, even if it's not a fully satisfying answer. I have one,
Mhm. Mhm.
and the big answer is that we're trying to shift active states,
Yeah.
right? I was a victim, and but I'm not right now, or I don't have to
Mhm.
live this way, and so there's an internal shift of perspective around what do I do with this feeling I have? Because it will still show up because it's was been there for a long time, right? So when it shows up, what do I do with it? How do I manage it? How do I interpret myself? How do I interpret the people around me? Like how do
Mhm.
I engage in life when this feeling will show up? What do I do? And that's going to be the big part of like how do we help resolve? How do we help heal these kinds of aspects and injuries?
Yes, yes. And Aaron, I would say, just want to encourage anybody that as we continue on with this series, like what's happening with, just if anybody has any presentations in their office, kind of like how we do, where we have to sit back and go, what is happening here?
Hmm.
Just to message us on inrelationship.us. That's inrelationship.us to let us know, and we can do an episode around it as well.
Absolutely. I also feel I want to say right now, if you're listening and you've been a victim, and that's not something you've ever shared,
Mhm.
you may have these feelings, and that's something you've never disclosed. But some of the things we're talking about, we don't want that to feel diminishing or dismissive
Mhm.
because we
Right.
are so filled with compassion and care. We want to do
Mhm.
that. We just want to really encourage anyone if they have that kind of undisclosed injury or have been a victim, to find a safe place to disclose that with a therapist, a trusted friend. Sometimes it may need to be the police. to report something. But we don't, we like part of our thing is everyone gets cared for. We want no
Right.
one to go unacknowledged
Hmm.
and dismissed. And so that's what I like
Hmm.
about the series is we're really leaning towards all of these different presentations, not
Hmm.
judging them,
Right.
because
Or
we want to be able to.
pathologizing. Yeah.
Yeah, we really
Hmm.
care about people that fit in these categories and want to show up well. So anyway,
Hmm.
if you have an injury and no one's ever known it, please, you disclosing it doesn't make you a perpetual victim. We
Right.
just want to let you know and empower you.
Yes. And I think that's a good, and I think that's a good place of clarity, in this, because again, going back to just the whole spectrum, a lot of what we are talking about are those who show up as adults kind of in this self state,
Hmm.
um where it really can feel honestly very trapping and imprisoning.
Right.
And that is a lot of the basis of how they make and get connection.
Hmm.
And so that's really like that's a hard place to be. And there is that heart, and I'm glad you brought that out, is like, man, for everybody, even for ourselves, for everybody, like we want more, and
Right.
going back to just even what Jesus offers, like it's just that life more abundant.
Right.
And you just don't ever feel like when we're trapped in a self state, when we're trapped in a prison, it's a prison that we didn't create, it's a prison we didn't want.
Hmm.
Um, that we just want people to know we don't ever have to stay there. That
Yep.
doesn't have to be your identity,
Right.
you
We
know.
we we didn't want an injury in the first place, but we
Right.
use what we got to get what we need.
Hmm.
And the scripture says that the one who tries to save their life ends up losing it because
Right.
we don't have what we need to really get there. And so,
Hmm.
um, as therapists, we have this unique posture, this unique opportunity to lead people through experiences, corrective experiences
Hmm.
that they may not get any other place. And
Right.
so,
Right.
what an honoring thing that we get to do.
Hmm. I would agree. I would agree. All right, Aaron. Well, good to see you, and we will connect next time for part two.
I'm looking forward to it.
Sounds good.
Bye.